How's everyone doing this morning? Good. Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you for taking time out of your day to spend some time with us this morning. We have put together what I hope will be a very interesting panel. I think the first order of business is to clarify what the panel is about. Yeah, because the people on the panel are like, what's going on here? And I'd like to start off by sort of framing it in terms of interactions that people have with, particularly with film. We live in a culture now where more and more of our information comes to us through mediated environments. And what is replacing those things that a lot of us grew up with, I mean, I'm not ancient, but I'm old enough to remember a time when we had social groups and bowling leagues and things like that, where that was really sort of the exchange of life experience happened in other places. But now a lot of the exchange of life experiences happen through the movies. And so what I'm interested in exploring today, because we have filmmakers, we have critics, we have people who have been around the industry a long time, people who are new to the industry. So I think we've put together a very interesting conversation about what is the role of film when it comes to having these conversations about these important life moments. And should we rely on them? And as we start to rely more and more on them, is there a certain responsibility for the filmmaker to be more aware of that perhaps they have a greater responsibility? So what I'd like to do is have each of the panelists introduce themselves and sort of tell you what their role is outside of the festival, and then to start with the question which I would like all of them to address, but I'd like you to meet them first so we know exactly who is participating in the conversation. So if we could start down there on the end with Doc.
Thank you. That's Doc Erickson. I've been on the panel a few times, you may remember. I'm a longtime production manager, producer in the film industry, but now retired for quite a few years. Thank you.
I'm Richard Leskosky. I've taught cinema studies here at the University of Illinois for 30-some years. I'm retired now, too. I also write film criticism for the local paper, and I've been doing that for 34 years. My area of specialty is animation, so I'm not sure how much I can talk about reality. And I always sit next to Doc on these panels.
Hi, I'm Ray Pride. I'm film critic of Chicago's weekly News City, news editor of moviecitynews.com, and I'm also a photographer.
Hi, my name is Jan Anders Diesen, not as it says here, but I'm a film historian from Norway. I'm specialized in silent film and in polar explorers films. And I'm very concerned about illusions and reality. But in the old days, very old days, 100 years ago. But I maybe have some viewpoints of the current situation as well.
I'm Steve Prokopy. I've been the Chicago editor, writing under the name Kohn for ain'titcoolnews.com for 15 years. And if you, depending on who you believe, we've either contributed to, in a good way, to the conversations and the social gatherings of people who love movies, or we've destroyed it. So maybe we'll figure that out today.
Hi, my name is Soojin Chung. I'm producer and editor of feature film Escape from Tomorrow.
My name's Matt Singer. I'm a film critic, writer, blogger. My main job that I do is maintain a blog about film criticism, which is called Critic Wire, and it's on the website indiewire.com.
My name is Sophie Kohn. I'm a senior at the University of Georgia in mass media arts for film production and sociology as well. And I hope to write and direct films. I have a short film that's showing at 1 o'clock today, along with my co-director, Fika, who's over there, and it's called To Music.
Okay, thank you. And I'm Eric Pearson. I am a graduate from the University of Illinois, and I teach film and television currently at the University of San Diego in San Diego, where it never rains like this, ever. But I can get to take some of it back with me. So let me frame the question for you. I think we could agree that people get more and more of their guidance about life and life experiences from film now, more so than perhaps 30, 40 years ago, where if you just look at the data, which talks about the number of interactions that people have with media compared to the interactions that people had decades ago, what we see is that it's having a significant influence in terms of just the amount of time that we spend with it. So my question is given that we live in a culture where more and more of those experiences, and when I talk about lived experiences, I really would like to get into some of the things that are really difficult to deal with. A recent film like Amor, for example, dealing with the deteriorating health of a spouse, or dealing with some sort of serious illness. When I looked at the films for this festival, one of the things that helped to spur me in this direction was that there were a lot of films that were sort of dealing with pretty significant family crises, right? Sort of how do we negotiate those particular crises? And sometimes when we're in them, it's one thing, but seeing other people go through them can also be very cathartic and can be very helpful. So, given that we have more of these interactions, my question, first of all, is one, do films have a responsibility, let's say, to get it right and to spend some time trying to get those things right? And do critics, when you look at these films, do you think about whether the film is emotionally honest or whether they are portraying things realistically if people are going to be getting information from that? So, and again, I'll start with Doc, because Doc comes from a different generation of filmmaking and can maybe speak to this situation sort of in the early days of film and how maybe it has changed as we deal with films now.
Well, briefly, I think in the earlier days, as you're talking about, and early days when I was in the industry, the chief reason for making a movie was entertainment. I don't think that I'll have a hard time sitting here now to come up with titles of films that really dealt with reality and people's problems and general society activity at the moment. So that lasted for quite a long time. And I don't know if I can pinpoint when it might have changed, but probably, 40 years ago, 50 years ago.
Yeah.
Something like that. But that's my comment.
So maybe like that sort of the social problem films of the 1950s might have been a sort of a point
Yeah,
where that started
True.
that started to change.
True.
So any of the other panel, I'd like to give you an opportunity to sort of respond to that.
Well, in terms of real experience, I think you see that in films at, say, Ebertfest and similar venues. But if you go to the multiplex, I'm not sure that you actually see that, unless your real life experience involves giant robots. Where we do see a lot of sort of real life experience in quotes is on TV and all these reality shows, which also aren't really real. They're scripted as well. So, yeah, I guess what I'm saying is if you want real life experience in movies, you should attend Ebertfest and similar venues and look to independent filmmakers who are dealing with those sorts of issues.
Okay. Anyone else want to weigh in here?
I've always liked Hitchcock's distinction of the slice of life versus the slice of cake. And I think we can have both. I mean, I'm kind of excited, if not necessarily energized, by all the ways that people are telling stories, whether it's YouTube videos or other permutations of that, or films from other countries. Film festivals is an alternative distribution circuit. But then you see a film that is playing here, which I think is absolutely great, called Oslo, August 31st. That film took forever to come to Chicago because it was, it opened in New York, didn't do very well, because it's downbeat. And it's a beautiful, beautiful, observant film, but it's downbeat. So it finally showed up in Chicago in 35mm on August 31st of last year. Just coincidentally, they didn't program it that way. But I had already gone out of my way to buy the British DVD because I was so excited to see this guy's next film. And in every format I've seen it, it's just like filmmakers are still making films, stories are still being told. And something like that can be, I mean, Amour, in a way, is horrifying, and it's cathartic, and it has certain mysteries to it, but Amour is a film that in its own way is, for the right audience, entertaining, at least to the Academy. So.
What do you mean by for the right audience entertainment?
The right audience. I mean, it's not film festivals are a nice thing for some filmmakers because people see films not necessarily guided by what's big at the box office or what was big at the box office that weekend, or by reviewers. It's what some people call a self-selecting audience, which is why certain art house films from places like Focus Features or Fox Searchlight wind up at festivals early, because that audience is seeing the film without the benefit of having been guided. They just are attracted by the theme or the filmmakers or the actors. But that audience, you know, more might, if it had been a different filmmaker, different distributors, might not have seen the light of day here. But the people who discovered it, that's what I meant by the right audience, whatever guided them to that film, for the audience that, you know, some people argued before its Oscar nomination that an older audience, like a large part of the Academy is comprised of, would not want to see it, or that would be too much. But in fact, it turned out to be, yes, this was a film that in a very structured and cinematic way explored something that we will all face.
Absolutely. To get back to your original question about whether films or filmmakers have a responsibility to, quote, get it right, no, they don't. But we certainly appreciate it when they do. Even in some of the bigger budget things, if a film like that, a bigger budget film, a Hollywood film, takes even one extra scene to develop a character, I get excited about that. They don't have to do it. It doesn't, you know, it's probably when a lot of people run to the bathroom or something, but in those kind of movies. But that being said, and I guess we're excluding documentaries here. They do have a responsibility to get it right to a certain degree. But I do find myself being drawn and sort of trying to champion films that go out of their way to feel like they were made on this planet. There's a film here I've seen a couple of times called The Spectacular Now that I assume you're all going to go see, but I will encourage you to go see it. Anyway, that deals in a sort of tangential way with alcoholism, and I've never seen it done this way, and yet it's probably, the way that they present it is probably an incredibly common way that it happens in the world. And it's a touchy subject, and it's a subject the directors has some experience with. Yeah, I mean, those are the films I find myself responding to more and more, which is unusual because for those of you who know our website, we deal more in the pop culture-y things.
And the giant robots.
Yeah, in the giant robots, which I love. But I do found myself sort of drawn to and trying to encourage people to go see the kind of films that I do think take on the responsibility of reality.
Matt, anyone else want to weigh in before I? Nope, we're all good? Okay, all right, good. I just wanted to follow up on this sort of slice of life versus slice of cake kind of thing, because often if you do get the slice of life, it takes some time to digest, right? Like not like cake, it just sort of goes away. It takes a while. You mentioned the Oslo August 31st, which is an excellent film. I encourage you all to see it. And it's a film that has stayed with me. I saw it almost 2 years ago at Sundance, and it's a film that has stayed with me throughout that time, sort of past the initial experience. So as we sort of move into everyone, well, let me ask, should everyone, you were talking, Steve, you're talking about because everyone has access to being able to tell stories, should everyone be able to tell a story? I mean, should, everyone who can hold the camera consider themselves a filmmaker and have a voice, especially if they get it wrong?
Well, like I said, I don't think they have a responsibility to get it right. And yeah, I guess technically everyone picks up a camera and stitches two scenes together, using their computer is a filmmaker. But I don't know. I'm not even sure. I don't even think. I don't think it's anyone's job to limit someone's creative freedoms. And if they get it wrong, they'll hear about it. The good thing about this easy access to the tools to make films is that there's also lots of ways to get it out there and lots of ways for people to tell you your film is crap. So sure, and hopefully they'll learn from that.
Okay, all right. Soojin, I wanted to ask you particularly about your film as the editor, as the Escape from Tomorrow? Yes, Escape from Tomorrow. How did you approach telling this sort of fictionalized story, but about a real place and space? And did this sort of the reality question, was that part of what your thinking was as an editor putting the piece together?
Oh, you mean when I'm editing?
Yes.
I think it's a part of it, but before I plan anything, the way we shot this movie is kind of limited. We're not shooting actually normal film way that we can talk to stories, and more towards, script itself has a fantasy and documentary feeling and everything is in there, but when you're actually editing, just when you watch the footage, it itself just tells you where you should go. Okay. So when I see the footage, it's almost like a documentary feeling, like a real kind of feeling, but this matter, is it really working when you actually put it together? It's kind of pasted together. Actually, it was, that was the point. You try hard to make it as a normal, classical, normal movie editing, but at some point you can make it, and that's the point, you are intentionally but also forcefully going to a little bit experimental and fantasy world, and so it kind of combined together. The footage itself has both sides, I think.
Sophie, I'm going to ask you, since you're a new filmmaker, how do you approach this idea of sort of truth-telling when you make a film? How do you approach that?
Well, going back to what you were saying, I think it is wonderful that, everyone, it's a lot easier to have the ability to go out there and make a movie these days. But, I guess as a filmmaker, I do strive to bring about emotion in the people who see them. And I don't know, I think this idea of going to the movies and it being this form of escapism, or going there for entertainment and to forget your reality is great, but I also think it can be even better if it's the opposite, and if watching a film makes you more self-aware and kind of guides your subjective reality and this true north that everyone's striving towards. If a film can kind of help you and lead you in a direction that eventually, becomes part of your reality, then I consider that a good film, and I consider that what I try and do in films that I make. So, hope that made sense.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. Is it as those of you who are critics, has it become more difficult for you with the volume of work that you have to deal with as critics to direct people toward those films that you think are important and that people need to see? Does it shake itself out and just sort of the good stuff rises to the top, or is it much more difficult to do that now?
It is difficult to do that now, and I actually remember something Roger said to a young filmmaker, probably just at the advent of when you could hand someone a DVD. Someone young and enthusiastic said, "I'd like you to see this, Mr. Ebert." And he said, "No, don't hand me that. I rely on several gatekeepers, film festivals, film studios, people whose taste I trust. And if you can get it through that, then you've earned it, and I will be glad to see it." But already at that point, there were too many films. A film critic, and especially someone of Roger's stature, would be inundated. And of course, now that's how I think everyone who's still doing the job feels. It's like another press release, another DVD, another streaming link. I just want to go see it on a big screen.
There certainly are a lot more movies to cover, and it's hard to decide sometimes what should I cover, what should I write about, what should I see even, because your time is precious. But on the other hand, social media, Twitter, Facebook, I think makes it easier in some ways, not only to find out which of those movies are worth seeing, but also to share it directly with your audience. If I see something today at Ebertfest that I love, I'm going to write about it, but immediately afterwards I could also tell the people who follow me on Twitter, this is the movie, and some of the movies playing here are available on Netflix or other sources. And if someone follows me and is interested about movies and trusts my taste to some degree, and I say this is worth seeing, and they go, oh, I should watch it, potentially within an hour they could be watching that movie, and there's something kind of exciting about that. And that wasn't possible 10 years ago. You'd have to write the review and hope someone reads it, and that connection between you and the audience is a little bit closer now.
One of the things about some of these films that are coming out, like Ray mentioned More as being the prime example, but those have been some of the hardest reviews I've had to write, because in a way you realize that the minute you tell somebody how realistic the portrayal of something is and how honest something is, you're going to chase away a huge amount of potential, possibly watchers, because of that escapism factor. Because a lot of people do still go to the movies, and did go to the movies to get away from those things. And I think it's great. I actually think it's great that these movies are taking these issues about economic troubles and alcoholism and Alzheimer's and disease and everything, that they're taking a very realistic approach to it. But there's a huge percentage of people that don't want anything to do with that when they go to the movies. They might watch that at home, and you kind of hope that they'll remember that these movies are worth seeing at some point in their life, but you have to sort of frame the review in a way that makes it sound like something they might take something positive away from. That's what I found, at least.
Talking about Amour, you could frame it as being something that is like a classical horror film. There's fear, there's suspense, there's catharsis. Except
that's kind of how you have to do it.
But it's a horror film about mortality, and that's, what was that?
There's a corpse.
Yes, it has. But does it have victims? I don't know what.
Dream sequences.
But I mean, in the absence of so many sort of human interactions, isn't it important that we have those experiences, even if we have to get them through a film that may not? And this idea of camouflaging it, I think, is interesting. So you take a film like Flight with Denzel Washington, which was a really interesting meditation about alcoholism, as if you've ever been around people who struggle with alcoholism. But it was sort of camouflaged in this plane disaster film. So in some ways, there was this very interesting conversation about this important sort of social problem, but you needed the plane crash to get people to watch because maybe people weren't going to watch?
The film wasn't camouflaged. The marketing was camouflaged. That's not the filmmaker's fault. Robert Zemeckis did it mostly right. Yeah, that's a marketing thing. I have no, we have no say in that really. But yeah, of course, that's what I'm saying. People want to see. Like, I'd go see a movie that had a giant plane crash in it. Sure. Right. But it just so happened that it was more about this other thing, which made me even more excited about it once. And I certainly didn't frame my review. I didn't camouflage my review. So
Does the ends justify the means? If you sell a movie as a big, exciting plane crash movie, like you're right, the flight marketing made it look like it was 100 minutes of movie and 75 minutes of plane crash or something like that, but it's really just the first act or less.
I like when people get tricked into seeing a good movie. I don't care how
Well, right,
they get
that's what I'm saying. Does the
care.
ends justify the means?
Doesn't, yeah.
Once they're in the theater and they're hopeful, I would say yes, but sometimes people get frustrated.
Well, one of the things I hate more than anything else, and I say this more and more, is that someone will come up to me and say, well, it was good, but it wasn't what I expected. I'm like, so what? Because it didn't meet your expectations, it means it's not a good movie. That has nothing to do with it. So, and they're not talking about expectations about it being good or bad. They're talking about expectations about it being a plane crash movie versus an alcoholism movie. So,
but then if it did meet their expectations, like, oh, it was just what I was expecting. It's really boring.
It is what it is. The worst criticism I've ever heard. That's what people say.
Right.
That sort of sounds like the comment section's wisdom that's always, it's just a movie, lighten up. It's like, why are you reading a review if you just want to say it's just a movie, period? I mean, the paragraph goes beyond that period.
Right. But do you think audiences now are more discerning of nuanced criticism where they help you in a sense in terms of doing a little bit more of the work? In terms of reading a review and saying there seems to be something more to this film that I need to invest myself in, as opposed to waiting for the critic to say, invest yourself for these reasons and these reasons only. I mean, how do you deal with a film that is difficult? A film like Amor. When you wrote about that, what did you write about?
I actually took my approach to that was actually what Ray said. I approached it like this is a terrifying series of scenes that results in one of the most realistic. I said, but they're all scenes that happen in real life, and they're all things that happen in real life, and it's going to terrify you and make you scared to get old, but yeah, I mean it's I think I sort of took that approach, but I don't really think I'd like to think I always try to push people. If I ever see false marketing, I always try to talk about ignore the commercials and ignore the trailers. That's not what this movie is. I try to point that out. I'm as honest as I can be in the reviews, so I tend not to bury the heart and soul of a film in some of the bigger moments that might draw people in. I don't feel like I'm working harder. It's just, like I said, it's more work, but I think I'm writing the reviews the same way.
So, Soojin, what would you like people to say about your film?
Fantastic.
Wait, let me hold on, I'm going to start writing these down. Fantastic. Yes.
Make it easy for us.
Yes.
Well, it's like, what should I say? A lot of things that we've been hearing, I think, but it's about just people just took our movie. It's not like a gimmick of American or Disneyland that kind of took it from out of it. I just hope that people read the genesis of the American family and what we're dealing with, or the attempt that we took in that kind of aspect.
Right. So do you think that people will be concerned about a film that says that this isn't the happiest place on earth?
What do you mean? Do I concern about?
Yeah, I mean,
I think it is the happiest place on the earth. Yeah,
Oh,
and
yeah, oh,
actually we are taking it into the movie too, but in a different point of view.
Okay. for those who, because I mean, you know, you're dealing with a tremendously common experience going
Yes.
to Disneyland or Disney World, right? That's a very. I'm just going to ask, how many of you have not been to Disneyland or Disney World?
Not too many.
That's it. So it's a pretty that's a pretty common experience that all of us have had. So it'll be interesting to see how people sort of respond to looking at it a bit differently, I guess, than when we pay our $85 to have the best experience on the planet. No, it is.
I think the less we say about her movie before we've seen it, the better, because I haven't seen it, and it's one of the big reasons I'm here is because this movie
I've
is
heard it's
playing.
fantastic. I have it right here in my notes. I have it right here.
I now
Says
want to
right
see it even
there.
more. Come on, Matt
Fantastic.
Singer says it's fantastic.
Tomorrow, that's going to be Saturday at 5 o'clock. So make sure that you get over to the Virginia and see it, and get there early because I really think that a lot of people are looking forward to.
And you may never get a chance to see it again. Maybe you will. I don't know. I hope we get into that because
Well, yeah, maybe not. Picking up on this notion of perhaps chasing people away from films, the people that read your stuff online and people who seek out these films, how can we get more people to have that, to say these are really interesting films? I mean, we have this great film festival and 1,500 people will sit in the Virginia Theater and have this wonderful experience, but then what happens on Monday or Tuesday? And you still have these great films that tell great stories, but how do we then sort of take that next step to see that people have those experiences? Because I mean, I've been doing this for 15 years, and every year I leave here feeling like I've been enriched in some way by a film that I've seen here. But it also is sad because I can't talk to enough people that need to have this experience, right? So how do we then sort of take that next step? Richard, I'm going to start with you because you write here locally. What happens to film in Champaign-Urbana once Ebertfest is over with?
Well, the resources we have would be the art theater, which shows independent and some foreign films, and also That's for Entertainment, which is a video rental store that again invests heavily in classical films, but also a wide array of foreign and independent films. So that's about it. It used to be that the campus was a really rich place to see films, but that was 30 years ago, and that's no longer true. It used to be that in the 70s on this campus, you could on a weekend you had your choice of about 20 different films that you could see, but that's not true anymore.
On your campus, Stephanie, Sophie, do you have film, like societies, organizations that screen films for students?
Yeah, we do. We have a couple different film organizations and clubs, and on campus we have a theater that shows some independent movies for like $1 for students, which is great. And our town has a local independent art cinema started by someone who lives in my town of Athens, Georgia. And it's been great for the community. But I think independent cinemas are great, and I think film critics can be huge advocates for the smaller films. I think, Roger was the perfect example of, I don't know, like the connection between the mainstream audience and independent filmmakers, because so many people read his reviews who, go see Transformers and all of that, and then they'd hear about these little films. So I don't know, I think there's lots of different ways.
I mean, there might be less local programming. And I actually ran when I was in college about a decade ago now. I ran the movies on my campus when I went to Syracuse, and I was in charge of programming the movies for several years. So that was my thing. So I sort of have a very nostalgic like longing for, hearing like, oh, we show movies for $1. We showed them for $3. So apparently we were overpriced, but but like I have a very strong memory and love of going, even in a movie theater on a campus, just going to the movies like that. On the other hand, when this festival is over this year, there are so many more movies available to people if you're willing to see them at home than there would have been 10, 15 years ago. And I think of following Roger's Twitter feed where he was constantly tweeting about a new movie that was available on streaming, and yes, it's better to see it in a movie theater if we can, but if we can't, isn't it great to still be able to see the movie somehow? And he was always promoting new movies, not just at Ebertfest, not just in his reviews. This movie is available on Hulu now. Hulu Plus has a deal with the Criterion Collection, which is such a stellar archive of the greatest films, of many of the greatest films of all time. And you can stream hundreds of their movies now on Hulu.com. And not just the movies they have available, like that you could go to the store and buy the Blu-ray. They have movies that aren't even available on Blu-ray or on DVD. So they have even more titles available on streaming. So, I worry about the theatrical experience, and I love it. But if if you really want to engage with movies, there are more, I think, out there now available at your fingertips than there used to be.
Yeah. The model of the art house distribution's in trouble for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
One of them is the digital handover. There are small independent theaters that can't afford to buy the projectors, and they're not being put under the program the huge chains used in association with the projector manufacturers and bankers. I forget the figure, but something like we might have as few as 250 art houses left in this country by the end of the year, partly because Fox Searchlight has already gone all digital. You can't get prints. They don't make prints. We also have the circumstance that's been discussed on IndieWire a bit, in a quite pitched way among programmers and other people who are filmmakers. The film festival model has become a de facto alternative distribution model, but it doesn't really help the filmmakers make money to make the next film. In the past month, I've been at True False in Columbia, Missouri, here, and at the Sarasota Film Festival. Sell-out audiences. It's amazing. They trust the programmers, they know the festival, and there are these packed houses. The next week, the same theater, a 20-plex, will devote 3 screens to art films, and 9 people will be there Saturday at 8 p.m. You can see tons of things on cable, HBO, Espanol 23, streaming video, and Netflix, and Fandor, and Mubi. The films are there to be seen, but this thing that a lot of us grew up with, the big screen, it's dark, and we just get into that dream state that Roger, among, I think most of us, always, dreaming wide awake.
Eric,
I'm sorry, Doc, you had your...
Well, he's touched on it. That's the difference, isn't it? What Richard mentioned too, that when he first started reviewing films and so on, or teaching films, you had fewer films to choose from. Correct. And you had an audience that was interested, of course. But now it's exploded into so many different avenues where films are shown. So it comes to mind that I read that Roger had reviewed 300 films last year, but that wasn't all of them.
Right.
There was a whole lot that he didn't review. Right. And so it's hard. What you're trying to do is to get everybody to see every film, and that's not going to work.
For a good film. It's funny you bring this question up about how do we get the word out on the good stuff. There's no substitute for word of mouth.
Correct.
So if we just, there are at least 2 films here that haven't come out yet. Soojin's film and Spectacular Night. I don't remember if there's another one, but I would strongly encourage, if any of you like those films, and I'm sure you will, that you spend the next Spectacular Now doesn't come out till August, so you've got a homework assignment this summer. That to spend the summer reminding people, talking about the movie, telling people, so that when it comes out, people are kind of ready for it, or people are aching for it in the weeks that, the Chicago Film Critics Association we took it upon ourselves because we were afraid some of our favorite films that we'd seen in festivals in the last 6 months were going to get lost, so we threw a film festival last weekend, and we picked about 20 films that we've seen at festivals, including Spectacular now, and just show them to people. We just created a film festival, and we took over a couple screens at a theater for a weekend and just showed them to people. And the turnout for most of them was pretty great. So, and it's the first time we've ever done it, and I hope we're going to keep doing it because we all have these like passion films, and none of the films that were programmed were like everyone, like at least one person in the association had to have seen it and loved it for it to even be considered in the festival. And so we just said, that's how we're going to do it. We did our job, and then we reminded people who came, now your job is to talk about this movie if you liked it, and talk about it till it comes out. And I think all of them were films, except for the one closing night thing, were films that had not yet come out. Some are coming out in May, some, we don't know when they're coming out. I don't even know, there might be some that didn't have distributors. But that's how radical you have to think sometimes to promote the movies that you really love.
Yeah. At my university, there's a club called Cine Club, and I did the marketing for it for a while, and then last year was the president of it, and the whole point of it was to promote the independent art cinema specifically to the university students, and it was very difficult. The cinema, the theater shows, like, I guess, let me think. One time they had a great print of 35mm print of Woody Allen's Manhattan that they were going to show, and afterwards I think they were going to show some local person's film that they had made, and they did things like that all the time, and promoting it and getting people there, and once everyone's sitting down, getting up and saying, okay, who's in this theater for the first time, and people raise their hand, and it's like, it's literally 2 blocks from the campus, and who's been to the Beechwood theaters and the multiplexes, and everyone raises their hand, and then you sit down and you're like, it goes dark and everyone watches it, and you can just feel in the audience, people, wow, this is a real movie-going experience. And after we all talk about it, and people in the club try and say, share this with your friends, tell them how amazing this experience is, and tell them to come here because you'll get addicted to it. And I don't know, but it is really hard to do. It's really frustrating when not that many people show up to something so great. So.
Yeah, because I'm curious. I was here in the '70s and saw, my first Fellini film at one of the, people just put up a 16mm projector, and for a lot of my life, I actually thought the sound of a 16mm projector was like a necessary component to film viewing because it was you could always hear the projector sort of playing in the background. And it's exciting though to hear that some universities are doing that. Unfortunately, at my institution, it's not something that we do. But when we get to the Q&A, I'd like to see if I can have a student from here talk about sort of how undergrads access different kinds of films in this particular environment, because I think that students, when you expose them to it, they can get really excited about it. But you have to shout through the Iron Man 3 trailer, which is on all the time, but to get their attention. I'm going to have one last question for the panel, but you can go ahead and line up if you have questions for the panel, because I'd like to encourage, take the last little bit of our time together to do that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I've been sitting here, the best place to listen to this fantastic discussion, and as a film historian, I could have pointed out a lot of interesting points of how things were earlier and how people went to the cinema all the time. But the discussion here is how to get people to see all those fantastic realistic movies. And you're talking about Oslo, August 31st. I saw that film in Oslo on August 31st on the premiere. It's the second film by this Joachim Trier. Everyone was waiting for that film. His grandfather was also a film director who made a very modern film, maybe the most acclaimed film in Norwegian film history, called The Hunt in 1949. And all the newspapers reviewed this film. Everyone loved the film. They got 6 points at the dice all over Norway, and people didn't come because it's a depressing film. And a lot of those films, you can read the review and think about those who had suffered through 2 hours, because it's very depressing when you come out of the cinema. And people don't want to have that feeling. And it's the same with Amour, it's the same with a lot of fantastic films. We can read about them, and then let somebody else see them. We can have this escape business that's with entertainment and yeah. So
I think critics of art house films need to learn to start writing like Peter Travers and Rolling Stone and say things like, "It's a thrill ride of clinical depression." Hey, bring on the popcorn.
Maybe so.
Yeah, from my experience, these days I feel there's an aversion to talk seriously about film, almost on to talk about it on a deconstructive plane, to elucidate the themes. How does this film speak? What to particularly look for, and so forth. There seems to be an aversion for that. I mean, I remember in my youth reading, take a popular film like Alien, and the title of the article, Capitalism in Space. You don't read this stuff anymore. You don't get an understanding, an eye, and how the audience become a partner in viewing the film, an active viewer. Agree, disagree?
Well, I mean, an aversion to talk by who? By the audience? By critics?
By the critics of the film. You know, they talk, this is a great film.
I have to respect
a roller coaster.
No, there's an amazing wealth of stuff. Matt follows some of this stuff on IndieWire.
I have to respectfully disagree. I mean, generally, I would say if you're not finding that conversation, you're just looking in the wrong place. Because you mentioned Alien specifically. Mm-hmm. A movie like Prometheus, which is a descendant of Alien. I didn't even like the movie. There was an incredible amount of very interesting things written about Prometheus online, including on Roger's website. Jim Emerson wrote a fabulous examination of the movie. And, on my blog, which is about film criticism, one of the things I do sometimes is if there is a movie that has it, I collect, try to find the best pieces and put them in one place with links. And we did that for Prometheus, and I could have picked 50 articles. There were so many of them. So it may be harder to find them. They may not be in the traditional sources, but I think they're absolutely out there.
Well, that will be one of the responsibilities in an art house, to make these materials available, to have them so when we go see the film, we go home and read about it, and it engenders discussion. Think about it.
There's so much of this. I mean, at Critic Wire, which is part of IndieWire, there's also David Bordwell does an amazing job with his observations on film art. Yeah. I aggregate headlines every day and was doing them before running down here for MovieCityNews.com. It includes high and low, art and commerce. Fandor has an amazing aggregator named David Hudson, who does a daily notebook that is like, my stuff is more like links with headlines that tell you what it's about and guides you there. He's doing the same thing Matt's talking about, where in paragraphs he's talking about, he does roundups from film festivals. Here's the 20 critics I trust. Here's 2 lines each they said. And it's just, there is a wealth of stuff. There isn't a wealth coming back to the critic, but there is a wealth of stuff for the reader that's just,
I'm sure there is, it's just that it's not.
You should ask anybody who knows about it. We'll give you some links to it, because it's amazing the amount of writers who are doing it for the love of movies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. I don't know if you guys are aware of it, but the Toronto International Film Festival has a program called Film Circuit. And what they do is there's, I think, over 200 volunteer groups all over Canada, in smaller communities, smaller centers, and they will screen independent films, films from TIFF, you know, monthly or biweekly or sometimes twice a week if they're really successful. We've got one in Milton, Ontario that I'm part of organizing, and it's, you know, I mean, talking about alternative film distribution, it's a great way to get people to be able to see these films. I mean, normally, you know, we're fairly close to Toronto, so if you can, you know, if you want, you could drive down and see some of these films in Toronto, but why would you? Because we have it at our beautiful new art center. So I'm just curious as to whether, you know, if any of the major film festivals in the States has anything like that, or if such a thing has been considered.
I'm not aware of anything that's sort of affiliated with, like you're talking about, with a film festival per se. I think in a community where I currently live, like San Diego, you really rely on the sort of few independent cinemas to really bring those films to you, unless you find some other way to get access to them. I mean, it's just
and that's
really,
why Film Circuit is great. I mean, it's they take care of all the distribution. Of course, you know, you pay for it, but
right.
They make all the arrangements with the distributors and the shipping and all that. We actually just show stuff on Blu-ray, but if people have
and again, you speak to the business model, because I always wonder if I ran a multiplex of like 18 screens, if I just said I'm going to dedicate 2 screens to independent film, like would I just end up losing money? Like I mean, if I just said as part of my role, I'm sorry.
We need an exhibitor sitting up here to tell us the answer.
Yeah, I don't know.
The independent theater that I was talking about, they do not make any profits on movie sales. It's all, they have a lab there that they rent out for events and stuff like that, and that's where they make their money.
Oh yeah, I mean, our Film Circuit group, it's run out of the Art Center. The Art Center is basically running it as a loss leader. They make no money. I mean, out of a $9 ticket, we make like $1.50 after you pay the distributor and the box office fee, and there's an administrative fee, and it's nuts. But
the digital format does make this sort of thing possible. The UK, the BFI started doing it a couple of years ago in a similar way with either Blu-ray, HD Cam, and now DCP. The thing is that a DCP, it's like costs $150.
Yeah.
No, properly authored Blu-ray to be shown in a cinema as opposed to a consumer one costs maybe $50, $60 if it's properly done.
Yeah.
That's really cheap compared to $12,000 for a 35 millimeter print. So this sort of thing can evolve and will obviously have to, because of the way people's attention spans are, you know, so balkanized.
Yeah, and sorry, just one more thing, talking about emotional honesty in film. The last film we showed at the Film Forum was Searching for Sugarman, which everybody loved. The one before that was Take This Waltz, which not so much. And I loved it because I thought it was one of the most emotionally honest films I'd ever seen, and people did not react especially well, which I just thought was odd and interesting.
Yeah, I tell you, I like a good cry in a movie.
Exactly.
I do. I mean, it's not. I don't do it every day because then that's just not cool. But sitting in a movie theater where people are having sort of the same emotional or having a similar emotional experience, it's as honest as group laughter. Group tears are as honest, and in some cases even more so. And I hope that you find a way to have people sort of expand that experience. So thank you. But I have a question for you. Do any of you have any information on video demand, like what the revenue from that generates? It's like
that's
one of the
secret. That's a trade secret. People will talk about it off the record, but man, they don't want to talk about it publicly for a lot of reasons.
Because I mean,
filmmaker jealousy of other filmmakers.
But it also seems like it's so much a part of this conversation. If what is really happening is that people are gravitating toward that as a way to engage film, but we have no idea as to how widespread that is, and it's just amazing that it's just like this secret. I mean, Hollywood, they talk about everything except what video on demand generates in terms of revenue. But obviously, it must be very.
People who are doing well with it are starting to talk about it, and sooner or later it will turn into the top, like the weekend box office top 10. People will start releasing it once they believe that it's a firmly established medium.
Yeah, absolutely. Sir.
So, Steve, I think your comment about what the audience obligation is to help promote these films is very interesting. And I think about a film that I saw at a film festival last year that then the filmmaker had a Kickstarter campaign to help distribute the film. And, you know, I as an individual contributed, and then that invested me in the distribution of the film. And so I think some mechanism for you know the filmmakers to invest to get their fans invested, and for critics to help define that this is a way to get viewers invested and to help promote this thing is a potential mechanism for how to get your audience to help.
But then you go from being an audience member to being a investor.
You're a literal,
Well,
you're a literal investor in this movie now.
Let me make it very clear. Kickstarter, I am not an investor. I put money into it. Kickstarter, you don't get a piece of it, okay?
Right.
I mean, invested in, you have an emotional investment in doing it.
Okay.
So,
Did the movie get released?
it's getting more and more out there, and yes, I keep
Which
finding
movie?
people-
Wait, did you say what movie?
Yeah.
It's called Hava Nagila.
Oh yeah, that is actually coming out in Chicago
Yeah.
pretty soon, I think.
Yeah.
So it is coming out.
Yeah,
right?
and so I think it part of it was this you know the people with Kickstarter helping out, and it was just amazing. So
That's fine, as long as but you still need to tell people to go see it,
Well,
whether you're
well-
making any money off of it or not.
no. So
Yeah.
excuse me. My point is that I think there's an opportunity for then the critics who people might gravitate to help people figure out how to help promote these movies.
Yeah.
There's an even greater number of Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and other projects out there than what's already impossible to follow on video on demand and theatrical and et cetera, et cetera. It's a swamp once you start trying to sift as a working critic through another 50,000 objects that are the Kickstarter film projects.
Absolutely right.
This question is for Sophie. This is based on pure ignorance since I'm new to this sort of venue and I'm not truly an urbanite. You mentioned true north. When you say true north, I think of variation and that the compass says that magnetic north is over Hudson Bay
Okay.
and deviation is something that's caused by man's error. What were you trying to say by true north?
I guess I was trying to say that, you know, we're all, or at least I guess I'll speak for myself. I'm, you know, on this earth just, I don't know, trying to figure out why I'm here, what's going on around me, whether this is a dream right now that I'm sitting here on this panel. And I don't know, I think that art, all kinds of art, can help me in guiding me to find out what I'm doing and why I want to do it. So I think that's all that I was trying to say.
Well, the best course to steer then is true north.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question for Jans Andersen. I really emphasize the way you speak about the film August 31st, Oslo, because I thought it was a very painful film, but very enriching. Anyway, I emphasized that, but actually I was really curious about your introduction, because you briefly mentioned something that I thought was very interesting about you being an expert on polar exploring in 100 years ago. So could you explain it a little bit?
I'm a film historian. I've been writing about documentary films and about Norwegian film history for many years. But the last 7 years, I've been researching the polar explorers films for the North Pole and the South Pole. There are a lot of films from that period, the heroic era and the mechanic era. But I felt when I saw this panel that I was a bit on the side, and it was very good to sit just quiet here and listening to what the others said. And then this is a discussion we can have. We have it all over the world. This how to get people to the cinema. But in those early days, they came to the cinema to see the big explorers trying for the North and the South Pole. But we can talk about it later. It's a bit on the side.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Which pole has the better films, the North Pole or the South Pole?
That's the South Pole.
The South Pole, okay.
But the first films from the North Pole or in that part of the world is American. That's why I come here. So the Americans were not the best explorers, but they made the best film.
Yes, sir, your question?
Eric, first I'll answer your question. In Evanston, there's a theater that's a megaplex, 12 theaters, regular movies, 6 theaters, independent, so small movies,
wow,
art movies, and they're doing well. There's another theater in Dallas, it's not quite as big, but is doing well and has been for years. So
right. Now, would you say that because Evanston is sort of a college town, that has a big influence over whether that will survive or not?
I would say that most of the people going there are not the college students.
Really? Okay.
But the two that you mentioned, I think, is Cine Arts in Evanston and then the Angelica in Texas. Those chains have a certain business model, and they both do know what they're doing. They do decide to build the theater in downtown Evanston because they can build a parking garage next to it and bring people from all the way from Wilmette to Highland Park and come down there. I mean, those are exhibitors who really know what they're doing.
Right. No, but he asked, could it make it?
Yeah,
I'm saying,
well,
in that case, it's making it. Steve, to your point, I go to film festivals. I see some movies I really love. I go to talk about them and tell my friends. The people that were there at the film festival said, "Oh, I just got a contract. We're going to sign it pretty soon to have a DVD and on demand." And you never see the movie again because the distributor doesn't do anything with it after they buy it. So, as the viewer, that becomes frustrating. I can imagine, in one sense, they got their money, but their film never got out. So their art never really got out there.
It never got out to theaters, you mean? It's out, trust me, there's very few distributors that are going to buy a movie and then do nothing with it. So
Well, but
doing
like the
something with
DVD, they said they were buying it to put out a DVD and it never came out.
I mean, I'm not sure which ones you're talking about, but I can't imagine someone spending money. I mean, it's not a lot of money in the grand picture, but somehow it's getting out there. Maybe it's not a DVD. Maybe it's strictly an online thing or a streaming thing. But
the last example I can tell you was a documentary, Off Two Minds. And I keep writing those people, and they say, "We don't know when it's coming out, and we've lost control." And the only thing they had the right to do was to keep taking it to a couple of film festivals. That they retained the right.
Yeah.
But that's it. They have no distribution rights, and it's not. And there were others, but that was the last one I did.
I'm sure. I mean, sometimes losing ownership, creates a huge legal. We had a film at our festival last weekend called All the Boys Love Mandy Lane that has been in sort of distribution rights hell for about 5 or 6 years. And not small like Weinstein Company related stuff, and but it's just now about to come out, but I mean seriously, it took 5 or 6 years. It was the director's first film, and he's done 3 films since, I think, and I mean it could be years.
Well, I know one guy who's trying to buy back his rights from Weinstein because they won't do it.
That happens a lot.
All right, that's my point.
Yeah.
Thank you.
First, I want to say, if anyone here is interested in on-demand and streaming film, then you should definitely check out Mr. Singer's podcast, the Film Spotting SVU podcast, because I think you'll kind of,
I'll give you the $20 for that afterwards.
I think,
That's fine.
I think if you have any perceptions of the kinds of movies you can watch online, then you would be surprised by the great array of things you can see, from classic films to new films that you can't see in theaters. But anyway, I studied film here. I'm not a current student, but I graduated 6 years ago, so I think I can speak a little bit to the kind of film culture that is here. I'm a little jealous. I was actually even here before there was a College of Media, so I think I may have been the last class before that was formed. I I remember very well the few films that I was able to see at the art cinema, and I really kick myself now for not going there more. But it does feel really disconnected from the campus. I mean, it's really not that far away. It's only like a mile and a half, but when you're a student here living in the dorms, even if you are interested in film, it kind of feels like it's difficult to get over there. So I mean, that was my own personal kind of feelings. I don't know if maybe other students want to leave their dorm room more than I did. But I will definitely advocate for That's for Entertainment, even though you can see a lot of great films streaming or otherwise. I think that is definitely a treasure here. And if you do live in Champaign-Urbana and haven't been there, I urge you that you go, because there are so many great, wonderful films. They have a lot of deals that you can rent movies for like $1 on specific days. So there's definitely no excuse not to go there. And many of my first experiences with great film came from entertainment. So I definitely urge you to go there.
Thank you.
Hi. First of all, of Two Minds, I just talked to the director last week, and he said May 17th. All right. On video on demand and whatnot. Wow. So if you don't see it May 17th, then you know, sound the alarm.
Getting things done here.
Yeah. So talking about how students access film on campus, I'm from Indiana University, and we just started like 2 years ago the IU Cinema, which is a university-funded cinema on campus. Everything's free for students, and going there a lot, it seems like there are the films that students are interested in and the films that the community is interested in, and very rarely do they meet. But I think part of it is at certain times you just have to embrace that students aren't gonna love, you know, this week we have Nelson Pereira dos Santos. Not a lot of students are gonna come to those unless they're assigned that. So, you know, we play things like Mad Max, you know, and that sort of thing. So I think that's part of how to get students to access those films, you know, show them something that they're going to show up for, and then kind of sneak in something that, you know, give them a little bit of culture while they're there. So,
okay, makes sense.
Anyways.
Thank you. I'm gonna close, but I'd like to have one more question for you all, because this whole conversation about access and reality and that sort of thing, I like being in a room with 300 strangers having a filmic experience. You know, I saw Fruitvale, for example, this past year at Sundance, and it just broke my heart in a way that was more powerful because it broke the hearts of the 300 other people that I saw it with. As people who write about film and people who do film, I mean, is watching a film on your phone by yourself, is that the type of experience that we're heading toward and we want to encourage? I always think it's sad. Like watching a film alone, I'm like, that's just sad. But there's this, film has always been a communal experience. And how do we recognize that there's a lot of material out there and there's a lot of different methods of delivering it, but at the end of the day, there's that power that comes from being in that room with hundreds of other strangers having that same experience. And is that experience, I may be just an old guy and they're like, dude, we don't do movies in theaters anymore, just on our laptops. Is that where we're going? And then, as you as critics, when you often review films, do you sometimes tell people you got to see this in the theater? Like, don't see this by yourself, or is that part of your conversation anymore? That would be a nice way to end the day.
I think subjectively, psychologically, if you're really engaged with a story on your cell phone, on an iPad, whatever, it's still the same engagement in storytelling and human behavior. Of course, robot behavior is another issue. But I like what a number of filmmakers have said, including Jonathan Demme used to say he liked to go to movies on Hollywood Boulevard when he started making movies and see them with just the random urban audience. He said that no matter how intelligent a single viewer is, any random 300 people in a dark room watching a movie will be more intelligent collectively than anyone in the room. And I kind of feel that a lot. There's always like you don't know that something's funny, and it strikes you as funny partly because of the ripple of laughter. There are just all these different dynamics that have been written about and analyzed, but you feel it actually galvanically when you're watching a movie with a good crowd.
You know, like I said, I love going to the movies, like going to the movies.
Okay.
And I feel like I'm going to be really, people are going to not like what I'm about to say. But so I preface it by saying that, you know, I love going to the movies. I ran the movies on, you know, when I was in college. Like, I love that. But I would still rather see a movie at home, not on my phone. That I can't do. But I'd rather see it at home on my HD TV. Where I think, you know, and even streaming, it's kind of unbelievable how good movies can look streaming these days. I recently watched Akira Kurosawa's Ran from Hulu on streaming, and it is stunningly gorgeous. Now, it's not as good as seeing it on the big screen, but it's better than not seeing it at all if nobody's playing Ran in my town. And I've had, you know, I live in Brooklyn. I still go to the movies all the time. It can be a transcendent experience. It can also be a horrible experience. You know, there can be people talking, people on their cell phones, people, you know, kicking my seat. It's not always perfection, right? It's not always, everything isn't Ebertfest. You know, Ebertfest is special.
You've been going to that theater on Court Street, haven't you?
Yeah, I have been, as a matter of fact. He knows the theater. That's the one right by my house, or the closest one that's not, there's worse than that, actually. That's the most bearable. But anyway, you know, so to me it's like, I've been reading a lot of Ryder's stuff lately, and one of the things that really jumped at me is what he said about the role of a good critic. And he didn't say the role of a good critic is to tell people to go to the theater, although that's important too. He said the role of a critic is to promote good movies. And the role of a critic is to, you know, I don't know, not hurt or to stop people from going to see bad movies. So if I can encourage someone to see Ron on Hulu, on their HD TV, not on their cell phone, but on their TV in HD streaming, and they love it, I feel pretty good about that. Now people are going to yell at me.
What reminded a few years ago, I remember started to get emails from places in the country that some of the art house films I was reviewing, I knew they would never get them, and they knew they would never get them, and so I definitely adjusted my attitudes toward watching stuff at home since then, because Matt's right. It's better to have seen it in a lesser way than not see it at all.
Not to see it at all.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's kind of what it comes down to, and we do have so many avenues now to choose from. I mean, a year ago I was on a panel about video on demand, and I don't know why, because I literally at the time had seen, I could probably count the number of times that I had watched movies on demand on one hand with fingers left over. So, but since then, I mean, just in the last year, I have sort of given over to it to a certain degree. If I know something's not going to open in Chicago, or if something's there that isn't screening in Chicago, but I still want to review it for when it opens in Chicago, I'll go right. I don't even think twice about it now. So, yeah, just anytime if I ever teach a class on film criticism or interviewing, and people say, how do you become a critic? I say, watch as many movies as you can, and try to watch ones made before 1990. Because it's just like, these are students, because that's pretty much, you know, Tarantino and Kevin Smith are probably the benchmarks for them, but they think those are old movies now. But, but yeah, and there are plenty of ways to watch those movies, those older films now that have nothing to do with the movie theater experience. So,
right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Steve will have the last word. Thank you all for your time and attention.
I wasn't Ray, how many big